This is the Bald Noggins Report. Please like, share, subscribe, and go to www.sorubausa.com and sign up for a free seed treatment sample.
All right, well, let's get rolling. Let's roll this.
Okay, let's get this thing going. Okay, welcome back. Here we are, another show. Bald Noggins. Yeah.
Right. That's why we're wearing hats.
Yeah.
I had to wear my hat at the very least. Just look like I thought I was getting
you look great.
Wig. But I was like, I've done that before. I mean, the bald thing, you know.
You could do like a beehive. That would be impressive.
You know, I mean, I've worked hard over the last 4 years to grow this back out.
Yes.
Well, Chris, do the introduction.
Good. I just did. You got
that's it. Well, no, but Elizabeth.
Oh, yes. And here, so those who are shocked that it's just not two old bald-headed dudes with a bald-headed guest, we have a little bit of a beautiful young lady with us on this show, which is very exciting. So Mike will have to mind his manners for the whole show. But yes, we have Elizabeth with us. Elizabeth, and she is not only our guest today on our show, but she's also our niece. So we're keeping it in the family. And Elizabeth has actually, to me, a very inspiring life she's led through a lot of, I'll let Elizabeth explain a little bit better than I can, but a lot of hospital visits, pretty much all throughout her life. But yes, she's overcome many obstacles and has defied the odds, I believe. Also, she is a consultant for book writers. She has a business that helps people write books. I am a beneficiary of that, so I'm grateful for that. And in the description, you'll be able to see the business and everything. You can contact Elizabeth, and she can help you with your next novel.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you've been married, what, 19 years now?
Yeah, 19 and a half. Wow. I'll be 20 in June.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's great. That in itself is an achievement. That's great. You don't see that much anymore. But no, that's who we have on the show today. So we're pretty excited. And Elizabeth, she's agreed to just tell her story as far as living the life she has lived. I know it's going to be inspiration to those who find themselves going to hospitals nonstop. She considers herself a professional patient.
Yes.
So I'm going to hand the ball off to Mike. He usually starts to show off with a hardball question.
Oh man. Yeah, the hardball questions. Let me pull one out of my hat here. Elizabeth, so you've kind of said we joking that we laughed about it, professional patient, but I mean your life, you spent a great portion of your life going in and out of hospital. What's your experience overall? I mean, what do you kind of tell our audience about what it's been like for you? Like, what was your growing up like? What's your deal? What's the story?
Well, I feel like, just to start off, like I was born with cystic fibrosis, which is a genetic illness. So both parents have to have a mutation, a gene, and there's a lot of different mutations for CF. I have the most common on both of my. So you have to have two parents who carry the gene, and it's not guaranteed. I have two younger sisters, and they don't have CF. They are definitely carriers of it, but and CF is something that I'm a really bad ambassador for CF because I can't explain the whole thing, but you can Google it, and and so basically it affects the viscosity of the mucus in your system, and everybody creates mucus, and mucus is helpful in the body to like get things moving and keep things going. But with CF, there's something with salt and all of that stuff that it makes it so that your body produces way more than you can handle. And so it often, affects the lungs first, but it can affect other organs too. In my case, like I've always had a scarred liver and, not a ton of other things. Does affect like the digestion system. So I have to take enzymes to digest my food and things like that. So that's
tell us, what's the average lifespan of a person with CF? I know it's increased over time as they've gotten more adept at dealing with it, but tell us what is the average lifespan?
Now, I just read that it's up to like 60.
Oh, that is awesome.
When I was born in 1982, it was probably like, it was still considered a childhood illness.
Yeah, so it was like, because I've known people like my wife's friend, childhood friend, had a sister that died like in the 50s, very young. I mean, like she was under 10 years old, so it was a tragic disease or genetic defect or whatever they call it. But very horrible.
I mean, it's considered a chronic illness, a genetic chronic illness. I think, again,
don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
For those listening, if you want to fact check what I say, feel free.
Yeah, sure.
I've had to interpret things in my own way to, it's like, it's always kind of scary, Googling symptoms because, you always end up with cancer or brain tumor, just something, and it can be sobering to, Google your own illness too. I mean, I know plenty of people with CF who like didn't even know there was a life expectancy until they encountered somebody who was like, wow, you're still alive. That's amazing. And, because parents deal with it differently. And like when I remember when I turned either 19 or 20, I think it was 19, my mom was like, the doctor said you wouldn't live past this age. Like this was your,
wow.
But you're still here and you're amazing. And,
I remember when you're younger hearing that, you weren't supposed to live much longer. So yes, obviously you have, and that's great. And you have a very long life ahead of you. I think you look really well. You look very healthy. And I know,
healthy.
And we don't, this show, you don't have to worry about giving us the medical definition, diagnosis. How do you stay motivated? What's your inspiration? What's your philosophical, look at life and being a professional patient?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about it before and I thought I'm going to start with when I first realized that I had something, but also what it means to be a professional patient. Okay. So I feel like this was my induction. Was the very first time I was hospitalized. I grew up when I was little, we lived in Alaska out in the Aleutian Islands. I was very healthy. I just took enzymes. I barely knew I was sick. The only time I knew I was sick is when, the elders of the church were called to pray for me or something like that. I'm like, okay, I don't mind attention. I'm an oldest daughter and I love attention. But when we moved to Oregon when I was 9 and, it's just a hard move. And then by the time I think I was 12 when I was first hospitalized and it was, at Dornbecker's Children's Hospital in Portland. And it was back when, they used to have patients, there were 6 patients in my room with me. And I was admitted in the middle of the night and I was ready for my mom to leave. I was like excited about this new adventure because I wasn't super sick. Okay. Like most of when I started to get sick, it's like I only ever coughed up blood, which is called hemoptysis. And on one hand, it's scary because you don't know what's happening. And on the other hand, it was like, the doctors always kind of seemed to be like, oh, you don't really know. It's just like rest, I guess. And that was, whatever. So I was finally hospitalized for it. And the next morning I woke up and I was ready for the nurse to pull back my curtain and like, I want to see who's here and I want to make some friends. And, I'm not your typical patient. I'm an extrovert.
You're not.
point I was an extrovert. I was looking for friends. And the little girl across, there was a little girl across from me, and she seemed also to be an extrovert. And I was like, oh, thank God. She's a little bit younger than me. I don't know how old, maybe like 9 or 10. And she was bald. And, you know, it felt kind of like a prison experience, you know, where you're trying to get to like, so what are you in for kind of thing. And so she asked me first, and I thought, okay, I need to like look or act a little sicker here. Like, I tried to like, I was like, you know, like trying to like, I was like, well, I coughed up blood. And she goes, oh, that's terrible. No. And I felt very affirmed. And then I said, well, what are you here for? She goes, I have brain cancer.
Oh, wow.
You win.
Wow.
But she was like super spunky, super just, and she goes, I love coming to the hospital because every time I leave, I get a new movie. And I thought, okay,
There you go.
okay. And she was just this little bubble of sunshine, like just, you know, and it was like, I felt like at that moment, you know, it was my first lesson in what it was to be a patient, especially as a child, was reframe, because all the adults in the room are going to be like, this is the most tragic place on earth.
Yeah.
And it was honestly the first place I felt like I had an identity that was okay to have.
Oh,
Which,
wow.
you know, it was a place that somebody said I kind of belonged. I belonged with these people. And it wasn't like I belong in the hospital or I belong to be, you know, but it was like, there's a sense of solidarity. And that was, you know, it was like, I'm so glad I met this girl. And I don't know what her life is going to be like, but she's really excited about all the movies and stuffed animals that she has. And she's probably not thinking about every, you know, like what's coming or her treatments or, you know, I mean, you just get through them, you know, like you do what you have to do. But it's not until you get older that somebody is looking at you with like your life flashing before their eyes. Like, you know, oh, she's never going to have her first crush or graduate from high school or have these moments. And it's like, but she has these moments, and these moments are what matters for her and what she's focusing on. Because when you're a kid, you're very present, like to everything, you know,
Right.
and so that was like my first induction to what it means to be a professional patient, is like how you hold it. You know, it's not what you're carrying, it's how you're carrying it.
Right. You know what? That's a great point. My son and his wife have 2 kids, and one has real serious food allergies, and the other one hopefully isn't developing that, but they're not sure if that's going to be an issue or not with them. And that's an excellent point you made about the kids, because the kids are just living their life at that moment of time. They have no concept of what, you know, they can look forward to the future, I'm sure, you know, growing up and everything, but they really live in the moment. And I was telling my son this, I said, hey, you know what? From my experience, kids just live in the moment, and they've got a good environment.
Yeah.
They're happy for the most part. You never know from looking at them that there was anything wrong, kind of a thing. But anyway, go ahead. That's a great point.
But I mean, you know, but as a kid, like you're in your moment, and then an adult, probably a parent, comes in, not necessarily a nurse or a doctor, they're trained, but a parent or a, you know, family member or something comes in, and you see something on their face,
right,
that tells you that you're maybe not thinking about something that you should be thinking about, or this should be a lot heavier, or like you're not quite sure. And, you know, and my parents and, you know, and I was very consenting to all of Christianity that I was exposed to and grew up with, and always felt like God was very accessible and, you know, no issues. You know, I never had any issues. But the confusing part that, you know, beyond just like, yeah, I get attention for being sick and people are praying for me and they want to pray for me and they want to prophesy over me and they want to, like, I got a lot of attention from, you know, the churches that we went to and healing conferences and different stuff like that. But as time went on, I realized, like, all right, there's been a lot of prayer, not much change. And nobody's talking about what happens if God doesn't heal me. And so I didn't feel like as I got older, you know, in my teenage years and stuff, and you're moving quickly towards adulthood. And I was like, I don't know what the next thing is if I'm not healed, because that's not being taught.
Right.
And
I guess that was what I was gonna say is you're just always hearing that you're gonna be healed, you're gonna be better. I mean, in a way, it's like that you would think is a good thing because then you have a positive attitude. But then you're right. What happens at some point? You're like, well, what? You know, I'm still not seeing it. I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So yes, I could understand the feeling of pretty scary, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, where it was just like this. It felt like I was getting closer and closer to a cliff, and I'm like, am I get to like what's gonna happen when I reach, you know, where I have to make choices about my life? Like, am I gonna go to college? Am I like, can I go to college? Like, what happens? You know, and health insurance is always a big deal. That on one hand, I didn't really think a lot about, like, you know, adult things. You know, like I remember going like, yeah, I'll go without health insurance. That's fine. You know, I don't need any enzymes for a while. I seem fine. You know, and just being like, there was a grace period for that for some reason, you know, and you know, always talk to your doctor before you get off any medications. But you know, getting to this place and being like, I don't know what to do. But also on the other side of it is like, am I disappointing people? Like, am I a barrier to their faith? Like, because they're asking God to heal me and God is not healing me. Like, so then it's like, you know, going through these seasons of like, you know, all right, you know, there were times in Oregon, you know, I'm sure you were in on it, Uncle, like, you know, to a certain degree where you're like, all right, here's what, you know, you have the Bible out and you've called who you think might be an elder and you get out the oil, and is this oil holy or is it not? You know, I mean, it's just from the kitchen, it's the olive oil, you know, and you know, okay, and then you, all right, where does it say to lay hands? And you know, and you're trying to follow this, like, and it's variations of this, like there's, you know, and to a certain degree, you know, just on one hand being like, okay, great, I have faith too, and at the same time, this is really awkward when nothing happens. Like, I remember just starting to cry so that something looked like it was happening, you know, and kind of the understanding kind of like over time, you know, as a teenager, the limits of certainty, the limits of faith, the limits of, you know, and at that point too, and I mean, and still in a lot of evangelical circles, it's taboo to talk about doubt. It's taboo to talk about no, you know, and because, you know, this, the annoying story of Daniel in the lion's den praying for the angel, and it takes 21 days, and the angel is like, thank you for continuing to pray because I had a lot of stuff to get through, and you know,
right? Did you pray? You did not pray long enough. I think you know what?
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think, although it's well intentioned, and I agree with you. Just different people, friends of mine that were struggling with cancer, you know, for all the prayer. I remember going up to this one friend of mine who was struggling with cancer, and I just said, you know what, get your life in order, because honestly, you don't I mean, all this stuff is well intentioned, but none of us are getting out of this alive. You
No,
know, none of
no,
us are. No, none of us know how long we have. And I think the downside of some of that stuff is you never get to just live in the moment. Now, I remember one time we were talking, you were at the house and we were talking,
mhm,
and you said at the time, I'm just going to live my life. I'm just going to, I can't remember when that was. It was probably, when you were in your 20s. I think you'd been to a conference or two or three, and you
mhm.
just said, I'm just going to live in the present and live my life. And I thought, man, that's powerful. That's a good thing. I mean, just to not get caught. I mean, hey, accept the prayers, appreciate the blessings,
Yeah,
but don't get caught up in this thing
right,
of I'm going to live for this event that may happen in the future. And
right.
until then, I'm in a holding pattern. And
Yeah,
you never get beyond that holding pattern because you're still struggling
right.
with, anyway, go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I mean, you're totally right, because you kind of have to. We're also, and not we all, but in this charismatic Christian belief in healing, like as a primary thing, like we want to see signs and wonders. We want to see miracles happen.
Sure.
And, my dad made a good point at one point saying, like, I don't know if I want you to be healed in a church, because then the church gets to use you as a trophy. And I'm not super comfortable with that. I was like, oh my God, thank you for putting language to that tension of like, do you own me? Do you own part of me? Do you like, this is between God and me, and, and there's so many elements to it of like, well, Elizabeth, do you have a sin in your life? You're like, I don't know, I was born with it. All right. Sins of the father, and then my poor parents.
Oh, well, that's probably true.
Well, and then it's like,
I know your dad.
I mean, and an interesting, statistic about CF is like Ireland is the one with the most population, or like per capita, I think, of CF patients.
Really?
And yeah. And it's a very European illness, genetic but it's like, well, I mean, I don't think it was a sin probably at that point. I think it was probably like, a combination of starvation and trauma and things that needed to be healed that changed the body. And, okay, here I am. But like, and, and I, this question of, so then how shall we live? And finding a grace to be like, it's fuzzy in my memory, and I've gone back to some of my writings. So I think it was like, I don't know, 17, 18, 19, 20, somewhere in there. I remember coming to this conclusion. I was like, no more prayer, no more laying on of hands. My spirit is dying here because nobody's paying attention to it. Yeah. I'm not paying attention to it. It's not being prayed for. Like in the midst of wanting the best for me, my soul is withering. Yeah. For lack of attention, for lack of listening to it, for lack of like
you in a way
the table.
Yeah, it's kind of like you become the disease. You're not really a person anymore. You're a disease. We need to heal you. That's interesting. Yeah.
And so it's like I remember being at a youth group thing when we lived in Colorado, and it was like a youth retreat. That's it. Youth retreat. And there was another guy in my youth group who had some kind of heart condition with his blood pressure, like another like genetic thing, I think. And when we got to the camp, his blood pressure had gone really high up, and they were going to have to take him to the emergency room. But before they did, they were like, gathered everybody around, let's pray for him. And the youth leader was like, I want Elizabeth to pray for you. And I felt so seen in that moment, like, thank you, because y'all are going to pray for healing. And I don't know if it's a pat on the back, but whatever. I went and I just prayed for his heart and his peace and his, that his that his faith wouldn't be rocked by this, that he just allowed it to be whatever it was, and that he was covered. And it was a really powerful moment between both him and I, where he was like, thank you.
Yeah.
And, you know, because you don't know until you know, you don't know until you kind of have this different sense. And most of us have this sense of like, well, if there's a problem, we fix it. You know, I mean, I feel like it's a very American. If there's a problem, we fix it, you know, and how you fix it. And, you know, and just for the record, my dad is Tim Honan, who has been on the show talking about his cancer diagnosis, which is great. I went and listened to them. You know, I did my research before I came on here. And
another subscriber. Sorry.
Exactly. I subscribed.
You hear that, everybody?
And I liked.
Excellent.
You know, but forgot what I was going to say. But basically, just like in this, there's having a chronic illness, and there's having a chronic illness in the American culture that is very ableist and does not see much value in people beyond their disability or their illness. And, you know, where it's like, it's not just Christians who want to see you healed, it's literally everybody else. I mean, remember during the pandemic, it was like, what do we do with the immune compromised and the disabled people who are at risk, and, you know, messing up our will to go, you know, wander around at our own free will. And you're like, wow, thanks guys. Like, I thought this was going to be an opportunity for you guys to see how the other half lives, and to appreciate that, and to go into internally to understand that actually there's never been anything called certainty or control or anything else. That I was talking to a nurse when I was in the hospital during the pandemic, and she was like, wow, you've been living actually with this kind of uncertainty for a long time, and we're just, you know, and like now our lives are uncertain. I said, no, absolutely not. You just woke up to the fact that your life is actually uncertain and you have no control.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Like, you know, you can be fighting for illness and get hit by a bus tomorrow.
Yeah.
You can be doing literally everything right and, you know, get stung by a bee, find out you're allergic, and you die of anaphylactic shock. I mean, you know, it's like literally. And I mean,
we have no control, right? Yeah.
That's
exactly.
the wisdom of illness, that I feel like, where it was like, okay, reframe. Where am I? What am I doing? How then shall I live? Like, when I asked to stop having people pray for me explicitly, like in person, like, of course you can pray for me in the privacy of your own home, in your little prayer closet, whatever. I don't care. That's great. I love that you're thinking about me, that you're holding me up. That's wonderful. But I need to take a break from this thing called healing that we've all decided means X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
I need to find a different context, some more language to help me figure out maybe how I live with this while still maintaining my faith. And, you know, and that was a long process, but a lot of it included like going into like a lot of Catholic stuff, where, I mean, the Catholics have been around for a long time. They very much believe in suffering, but there's a lot of beautiful writing about living with suffering and living with something where, and you know, an illness or something that, and that the belief that suffering actually brings you closer to God, you know, however that looked for that person, however they were interpreting it. But just an affirmation that, like, you don't have to be healed to be whole.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of, you know, I remember one person when I was, you know, a teenager, and he was like, I'm going to start calling you the healed of God. I'm thinking like, okay, I you know, and the whole name it and claim it, and the, you know, it's like we just throw things at the wall, you know,
right.
And you forget the wall is this person who's literally trying to figure out who they are and to not be defined by illness. Like, how do I not define myself by illness? But how do you not define me by illness? How do you not tell me who I am or who I'm not? And, so, and it's true that, I mean, I don't consider it any kind of unfaith or, where somebody might say, oh, Elizabeth, don't say you're a professional patient. Like that's naming and claiming something you don't want. And I'm like, you don't understand what illness can teach you that is actually fundamental to the human experience. That as a culture, we give you 3 days to grieve over a loved one from work. We slough off people, the elderly into homes because, in some ways it's like they're living longer, but they're not necessarily living better longer, so they do need care. They do need help. And that's fine. But that there's a certain place in us that's like, I don't know what value they have to me to keep them around me or for me to be with them, and the same, and it trickles down into the sick and disabled people who live with a limitation that forces them into a meaning of life that actually is super life-giving. Like one of the things people love to tell sick people, whether they've been sick for a long time or a short time, is you should rest. Go rest. Like just, and I'm thinking like, you go rest. You try it. Tell me how easy it is. And then you can tell me to rest. Because rest, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But rest is something you have to learn. You literally have to learn because you're always doing it and you're always hating it, because you want to be out there living. You want to be out there like changing the world and being a contributing member of society. You want to be productive. And it's frustrating when you're in a place where maybe you can do one thing a day. And that one thing is like, you can either do the dishes or you can try writing. You don't get both.
Well, I and I don't mean to sidetrack you here, but at some point I want you to get around. There's a really cool story wrapped in, and I think it was you had gone down to Florida, and this is probably what I was thinking of earlier when I mentioned that point in your life. And I think you're in your early 20s, and you got back from that, and that's when you said, I just decided to live my life and go on and tell everybody when you decided that, tell them what, like within a short period of time. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's this healing ministry in Florida. It's in Florida or it's in Georgia. I think it's in Georgia. And I can't remember what it's called, but
doesn't even matter.
It doesn't matter because it was both great and not great at the same time. And basically their premise was that there are spiritual roots of disease, which I agree with to a point. Like there are mind-body correlations 100%. But anyway, I was in my 20s, early 20s. My parents had told me that I could live with them for the rest of my life. And I thought, I need to do something.
As a motivator.
Oh man. Oh, that's awesome.
I just had pneumonia, and I was just like, Elizabeth, if you need to stay with us forever, it's okay. That was the speech I needed to really.
That's reverse psychology in motion right there.
I appreciate it, but I'm gonna find a different way. So I went to this conference, and it was really good. It was like a week-long thing, and I got to go with Uncle Dave and Lauren, and for me it was it was different because I'd been taught to pray for people in a specific way, and I'd been to a lot of like healing ministry conferences, and these guys were professionals. They were really, really good at what they did. They'd thought through this in a kind of spiritually scientific way, to where it wasn't just didn't feel like they were throwing things at the wall. And what kind of came up for me was just like, it never was revealed what the spiritual roots of CF was, or what was keeping my healing back, so to speak. But what did come out, I did feel like I got some freedom and clarity from just a lot of like bitterness that I had been holding, whether it was toward God or I don't know. It's been a long time. But and I got rebaptized, and it was just good. It was just a good, but it was also like, okay, it also didn't heal me miraculously, like in that moment. And even if the healing was like starting, and I remember having like somebody praying for me and felt like a word from God was like that God was healing me cell by cell. And I was like, how long is that going to take?
Be a while.
Hope they stop dividing.
Thanks for the certainty. We're all looking for certainty here, and it is not coming. But there was clarity about, where I felt like I suddenly knew that I needed to maybe marry like my current husband. He's been my only husband, just for the record. But, and there was just like a lot of clarity. And so it was like, in some ways, like I was a good budding feminist. How do I get out of my parents' house? Get married. But there was also just like, I'm just going to live. Like I literally have tried everything, that has been presented to me. And at this point, like, whatever happens. If God wants to miraculously heal me someday, great. But I'm not going to start treating God like, it felt kind of like, thinking back on it, it felt like being addicted to the casino, where you're just like, all right, today's the day. Today I'm feeling lucky. I'm going to, put a lot down on healing today. And where you're just playing the slots. Does God feel like healing me today? No.
Yeah.
And where you start to get into this weird relationship with something that you want, something that you think is essential to your life, to living a full life, and finding out it actually wasn't essential to living a full life. It's called limitations. It's being where you are. But also, like, I liked when my dad was talking about, like, I've been trained for war. And, whether you like it or not, when you are somebody who needs healing, whether from a chronic illness, something acute that's just come up, you are automatically inducted into war. People will tell you, you're going to fight this, you're going to beat this, you're going to, and I had to quickly step away from that. I don't want to see CF as the enemy. I want to see CF as part of something that's in my body that I need to make friends with, that I need to make, that we can't have an antagonistic relationship. It's not going to work because in some ways, CF is always going to win because it's always going to interrupt me. I'm going to get a lung infection. I'm going to have to go in the hospital. I'm going to have to stop whatever I'm doing for 2 weeks. And then I'm going to have to recover from that. And who knows how long that's going to take. And so learning to start to like scale what I like, kind of like the essence of what I love, the essence of what I like to do. This leads nicely into like being listed for transplant. So I ended up, my lungs deteriorated enough that I was going to need a lung and liver transplant. And I was going to have to go on that list, move away from home. We were living back in Alaska by that point. And I was going to have to move to Seattle without my husband because he had a job and health insurance that needed to be kept. And thankfully I have friends who live in Seattle. I had family who lived there. And I just thought, I can't go into this seeing this as like a time of waiting. I feel like my whole life has been waiting for something, waiting for like to get married, waiting to move, waiting for Jamie to get done with school, waiting for some, revelation to, just always waiting. And I'd realized like I have to stop waiting. I have to stop being a victim. I have to like take control. And there's been a lot of iterations from that, of that over my lifetime. But and so for me, it was like, I've been married for a long time, and I've never lived alone. I've never lived outside of somebody else's, of having to consider somebody else's schedule.
Mhm.
Like, so when I moved to Seattle, I lived with my cousin and her husband, and they just kind of let me do whatever. I had a car that I got to use. I had, it was like, I was on my own and free. And I was like, I want to see when I wake up and when I end up going to bed and when I'm the most productive and creative and when I'm not. And I want to know how I actually fill back up. Like, how do I fill my cup? What do I love? What do I gravitate towards? And I'm the kind of person, I'm more of a people pleaser. I'm an oldest. I'm used to emotionally managing my situation and, around people. And so to focus on myself is really hard when I'm around other people. And so I termed that season as like an infinite sabbatical till whenever I was going to get that transplant. And I did stuff, and I was just like, I am going to do all the things. So I signed up to help with like CF online adult conferences, and I got to like co-host one of those, and then I led a lot of stuff, and I started writing groups online, and my social life was primarily online at that point. So when the pandemic hit, it really didn't affect me much.
Oh,
But I was just like, if life is always interrupting me, let's start as many things as possible so that I get interrupted. Like, what's better than being interrupted by, and plus when I was listed, I remember talking to my dad. I was like, hey, they just flipped the switch and I'm now officially on the list. And he was like, great, let's pray it happens like this week. I said, absolutely not. Just because I'm listed doesn't mean I am mentally, emotionally ready in any way. And I was not. And I went through, and I ended up waiting 2.5 years. And I went through so many emotions, and, that by the time I got to the transplant, which, was just a random call on a random afternoon.
wow.
And I remember the guy calling, and I had coughed up blood that morning again for the millionth time. And so I called my nurse and left a message with her. And so I thought she was calling me back. So it was like, hello. And he's like, hi, this is so-and-so. And I was like, oh, I've never talked to this person. He's like, I've got an offer for you. And I said, an offer? Like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, haven't you been called for transplant before? I was like, what? No, like nothing. I had no dry runs, which is you get called for it and then it doesn't work out at the last minute for whatever reason. I'd never gotten a call. And so, he was surprised that I'd never been called. So I was like, no, start from the beginning here. Like, what is this? He's like, well, we've got some lungs and liver if you want to take it. He's like, do you want to take it? I'm like, yeah, I want to take it.
Wow.
But it was so peaceful. Like, it was so peaceful. The experience of moving through the pandemic with other people and having all the controversy around the pandemic was more traumatizing to me than my transplant.
Wow.
By far. And my transplant was just, I just knew it'd work out. I knew I'd be fine. In some ways, I was like,
some problems. Didn't you have a problem with the lungs or something?
no, I don't think so. I mean,
okay.
Also too, like, I was not privy to anything that was happening live once I was put under. And I was out for another 5 days after my transplant. So I don't have any memory. So, everybody who was waiting on the other side was pretty traumatized. I was out.
Wow.
I-
Wow.
You know, and thankfully Jamie got to be with me during that whole time once I was out of surgery. But you know, it wasn't I was like, I was almost like a little bit frustrated with myself and my emotions because I wasn't feeling overwhelmed or grief. And I had felt so much grief leading up to it. Like, how do you pray for a transplant when somebody else is literally connected to the other side?
Right. There,
You know?
yeah, you're using someone else's organs. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, let's hurry it up here. And I'm like, whoa, you know, you.
It reminds me of when I was young and we were involved in church. We had a guy at our young adults group that had diarrhea really bad, and so we all crowded around him and commanded that diarrhea to go right now in the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
We had everybody shouting over him. It was hilarious, but yeah.
Good thing he didn't go right then.
Oh, well, we were kind of hoping it would have been interesting, you know. It did a funny sort of.
Did you pray outside of the bathroom? Like,
It was close enough. He could have made it.
right, totally. But yeah, and you know, thankfully I'd had some conversations with one of the chaplains at UW, and he found me after I'd been admitted for, you know, because you're admitted like 12 hours, 8 hours before your set surgery time. And so my surgery was set for like 10 o'clock the next morning. So I was admitted around 8 in the evening the day before. And I made sure to wear my Dutch Harbor sweatshirt that on the back it says, the beatings will continue until morale improves.
Oh, man. Keep
You
that
know,
sense of humor.
You know, but when he came, he was like, I remember you telling me that, you know, you wanted to make sure to, you know, thank your lungs and, you know, to like, he kind of brought the emotion back, like kind of reminded me of a lot of the process, the thinking, the emotion, the philosophy that I kind of brought to it. And he was able to kind of say a blessing, and that meant the world that he remembered because I didn't remember. Even though I'd done 2.5 years worth of prep work, you know, for this one moment. And, you know, it was really, really sweet and good. I felt more connected to myself in that moment. And everything went really smoothly. I had one night after I'd woken up, the first night I was in ICU after I'd kind of become conscious again. And the nurse had stayed with me literally all night. She didn't take lunch or anything because I was, you know, a delusional, medicated mess. And so then, and I couldn't move really. Like, I couldn't feed myself ice, which is all they would let me have. I couldn't, you know, and, you know, having that tube in your throat for 5-6 days. And when I woke up, I still had it in my mouth and you know, down my throat. And I was just like, get this thing out. What is it? And, you know, and I was so thirsty. All I wanted in the world was just to like, you know, a huge big gulp of ice water, you know, which they were like, no, here's a little sponge with some like lemon flavored, you know, moisture that you can rub around your mouth.
Oh, that's brutal. That's like torture.
It was. And I was thinking like, guys have done this multiple times with multiple patients. Don't you know the immediate thing that they want? Like, you need to have it. It was like, oh, your mouth is really dry. I'm like, I know I'm not the only one here. So anyway, that was my primary discomfort throughout most of the first 3 weeks was, you know, Jamie
People do die of thirst, so that's a pretty important discomfort. So,
but I mean, they were giving me saline fluid. Yeah. Like I was not, in no way was I dehydrated. It was just that my mouth was horribly uncomfortable. When Jamie would come, all I wanted him to do was just feed me ice. But anyway, the second night, the nurse had 2 ICU patients. And she seemed to like never come, like she was like, you're gonna have to figure out how to get your own ice, and you're gonna have to, I'm thinking. And by the time the morning nurse clocked in, and I was just like, is anybody going to come and help me? And she was like, well, I'm helping this other guy. And I'm like, whoever it is needs his own freaking nurse. Like, I was so mad. And the rounding doctor came in, and I was like, you need to have a better staffing. And I gave him, you know, I mean, talk about like advocating for yourself while medicated, but I did it. And the nurse came in. I said, are you sharing? Do I have to share you? Well, yeah, I don't want to share you. I will not share you. Like, I was, and Jamie came in. He's like, not that big. I said, I could have died if nobody came in here when I needed them. Like, I was so mad. But that was the only hiccup that I had, really. I mean, and it wasn't scarring. It was like, I stood up for myself. I got what I needed. And because you always have to advocate for yourself, you know, I mean, like,
Right.
I mean, I know, like, in conversations with my dad, you know, where it's like, of course the medical system has its failures, but literally, like, you know, when you need your life saved, they save you, you know, and it's like, you know, my biggest thing with people who are all alternative, which I won't say my parents are not, they do appreciate, but is like, you have to give credit where credit is due. Like, they literally saved my life. It would not be sitting here if it hadn't been for them. And if I was sitting here, I would be hooked up to oxygen, and I would have to, like, you would have to do a lot more talking.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Well, that's
wow.
not a, oh, we hate
That
doing
is
that. You
interesting.
know what?
You know, I know, Honans, you know. And I remember my mom came to see me while I was on the wait list at one point, and I was just like, I'd had a lot of thoughts, and I am my dad's daughter. And she goes, man, what are you going to be like when you get new lungs? I said, insufferable. I'm finally going to get my share of the conversation. But yeah, and you know, I mean,
So has your life changed a lot since you got the new lungs? I mean, is it for?
yes and no.
Yeah.
The first year after transplant was horrible. I had some issues with my liver, my new liver, and they put me back on the liver list, and which I felt just horrible about. I felt terrible for my donor that, you know, like, what if I ever talk to them? I have to tell them that we lost the liver too, you know, like, just, and, you know, people don't realize it takes a long time for your body to process anesthesia and pain medication. So, like, I was tired for months afterward, and I was just so frustrated. I was just like, when do I feel better? Like, when do I have energy again? Like, sure, I'm not coughing, and yay for that. Like, it's definitely not something to be taken lightly. But, like, I had steroid-induced diabetes, and so suddenly, like, eating, and I had to take insulin, and it's just,
That sounds rough.
and then halfway through the year, I found out I had a lymphoma cancer because my anti-rejection meds had gotten too high, and so my immune system had been I still have I am immune compromised, but my immune system has to run to a certain degree to keep cancers and stuff at bay that would pop up if you didn't have an immune system.
Right.
So anyway, and which can happen. I knew at some point I would probably get cancer. I was just glad to get it out of the way. And that was, you know, there was a lot of other stuff going on at the time. And it felt like I finally had to tell myself, Elizabeth, you have cancer now. You have to focus on yourself. You have to let whatever else is going on that I want to focus on go. And, you know, again, where it's like renegotiating, you know, when illness flares and really shows up back in your life. And, you know, and cancer was a different thing because people know people, everybody knows somebody who's had cancer, everybody, you know, so like it's different than telling somebody I have cystic fibrosis, because a lot of people don't know what that is. And if they do, they do give you a weird look like, oh, yes, you know, like I know somebody. And I'm like, great. Or they've Googled it, you know, you're like, just take it with a grain of salt. But cancer is like, so I really waited to kind of tell people and to announce it, and announcing it with a video to say, like, look at my face, look me in the eye, I am okay and I'm gonna be okay. I had no doubts that I was gonna be fine. It was like totally, and honestly, like going through chemo and stuff, and granted, I know that, you know, I still had my port and I was set up for it. Like, you know, it was like, but what was great about it was that I finally knew when I would not feel good, because I was on a 21-day cycle. So it was like, I could plan around it. You can't plan around CF exacerbations.
Yeah.
You know? And I was like, dude, this is like the easiest disease I've gone through.
Wow.
You are a professional patient
You
when you're
are.
planning around your disease.
I know, and everybody's like, well, cancer. I mean, okay.
Kick cancer's butt.
Yeah, I'm like, we're gonna be
It's
just
lightweight.
fine. And I was, but I also will say I have never been as, like, you know, you can be weary from being sick, and that's, you know, it's a cycle, and that will happen. You cannot maintain, you don't want to maintain a toxic positivity about it, because then you're not looking at stuff you need to look at, that the illness is like actually helping you to look at. That is really important. We all need to be thinking about mortality. We all need to be prepping for it. We all need to be thinking about how we give, but mostly how we receive, because at some point you get old enough or you're in a situation where you're going to have to receive a lot of care. And if you think that your identity is wrapped around being a giver, well, I have news for you. The universe is like, you are a person and you will do both. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And you can go in fighting, and you can go in with some grace for your humanity, for your situation. You know, when I was in, you know, recovering in the hospital, recovering from the transplant, I mean, I just went, my identity is not going to be linked to my bodily dignity in any, it can't. You have no modesty. People have to literally clean every part of you, you know?
Yeah.
I couldn't walk for a while. Even when I got out of the hospital, Jamie had to take me to the bathroom and help sit me down and then get me back up. And, you know, I remember at one point I was in the bathroom and I was just sitting there thinking, and I was like, Jamie, he goes, what? Or after, anyway, I was sitting on the couch and I was like, Jamie, do you realize I could get like any job now? And he goes, why don't we work on getting you off and on the toilet? Like, okay, fair point.
Okay. Baby step.
But anyway, I mean, my life has definitely changed in the sense that I do have a lot more, you know, I'm not coughing all the time, for one thing. I don't have to do 2 hours of breathing treatments every day that really put a damper in your evening and your morning. I'm not getting sick every month. I'm, you know.
That's awesome.
I'm taking care of my nephews, which I would never have done before. And
that's right. Does Molly live close by to you, or?
Yeah, she lives like 10 minutes away.
That's awesome.
So, so yeah, I mean, on one hand, a lot has changed, you know, just physically, emotionally, and spiritually, you know. I mean, when I come back, we can talk about, you know, the ins and outs of recovery and what that looks like, you know.
And that sounds a great idea, which we will do. But we'll just close out. We've been an hour. I don't want to keep you two any longer. Really, I mean, I'm just listening to you, and, you know, it's in a way, you know, kind of like we all have a cross to bear. You know, why are people praying that cross off of you? That's the cross you bear. In a way, I'm thinking of a lot of different things as you're talking. That's why I think it's you're quite an inspiration, just of how you look at, the disease and how you live your life, regardless of what's in the way. Just live through it. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Mike, you have any?
When as I was talking to you, do you remember, Elizabeth? You probably watched this show. Remember, Mysterious Ways? Remember that show, Mysterious Ways? It was like a Touched by an Angel X-Files mix. And this is 25 years ago. And the first show was about a transplant patient that had a strange desire to go to this place, and they were captivated by, and I can't remember all the details of the show, so I'm probably gonna mess it up, but they're captivated by this Motown song and this one place they had never been, this mountain, and they had to go up on the mountain. And they found out that the person who they got the transplant who died, and they got had wanted to do this event before they passed away, and they didn't get to do it. They wanted to get some singers and do this Motown song on top of this mountain. And it was like this amazing, it was really an amazing, that one show in particular was so poignant and amazing. And I don't know if it was based on a true event, but I think it had a connection to a true event. And I think that there was a lot of hope in that. Life doesn't end here, and who knows where you're going to go, but live your life fully, best you can, with the limitations you have, because we all have limitations. Me, not so much, but other people.
Other people have. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. But
that's why we have you on the show, Mike.
That's right. Anyway, it was a great show, and I thought about that. But thank you so much for sharing your life story and your things, your struggles, your ups and downs. We really appreciate it. It's always good to chat, catch up.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Well,
adios, amigos.
Stick a fork in it.
Bye.
Bye.